You're giving a talk tonight to fill in the vacuum, who will save multilateralism. Would you say the UN failed is too strong a word, but do you think the UN is not able to fill this vacuum?
Well, I will try to argue tonight that multilateral organizations and the UN bodies in general, they have never found it easy to carry out their mandates. But in recent years, this has been compounded by populist tendencies. When Donald Trump, he took over power in the United States a couple of years ago, I think it took a turn for the worse, and that threatens many multilateral agendas and bodies. The damage could be irreparable if the vacuum that is left by the United States pulling out of various organizations is not filled. And for all its flaws, I think the United Nations remains the most representative, the most legitimate global structure, which is uniquely suited to serve as a forum for mitigating the world's problems. And we have many problems today. In fact, the planet is up against the wall in many respects when it comes to climate, resources, water, pandemics. Of course, the climatic changes alone makes it quite clear that we need multilateralism, perhaps more than ever before.
Can that be done if the United States will not take part as what is one of the biggest powers in the world?
Well, one of my conclusions, of course, there are many elements of the answer to your questions. But simply put, I believe that the European Union actually understands the role of the United Nations for the simple reason that it is based on the same value system. If you look at the treaties of the European Union and you look at the UN Charter, you will find more or less the same values, human rights based, etc. So the European Union, they will continue to put pressure on the UN to reform itself. And the reason why the European Union is doing this is because it's got a very clear self-interest in leading the way forward towards effective multilateralism, because it depends on it itself. Not only in the relations between the European Union and the rest of the world, but recently, even within the European Union, you need these values to be strengthened.
Do you think there's the will in the European Union to do that? Do you think it could be effective?
I think there is a will, but it has to be strengthened. The European Union has to work on this internally. But as I said, my analysis is that the self-interest is so strong that to some extent the European has no choice. It will need to find a way to strengthen multilateralism, to give it a second renaissance now, which is necessary. If you remember back, the United Nations was formed in the chaos of World War II. And it was created because people, they had the vision that in order for the world to become a peaceful place where one country could coexist with the other, you will need an organization where multilateralism thrived. Trade, rebuilding, everything depended on that. And you could to some extent say we are there now as well. Multilateralism is being eaten away every day, but in future, so it's better to start rebuilding it now and reforming the United Nations so that we are ready. Perhaps one day the European Union can persuade a future president of the United States to come back again as well, which would be the best solution of them all. But can I ask you a counter question? Who else could do this?
And what would your answer be?
None, nobody. There's no other actor on the international scene that could actually go in and defend multilateralism and help in the reform of the UN as effectively as the European Union.
Is that because there are so many countries involved, 28 currently, whereas some of the other major players in the UN are just countries of their own, China, the US, and thus have their own self-interest, whereas the European Union can think broader than that?
The European Union is a major global power. It has an enormous GDP. If you put the whole European Union together, 28, it's the highest in the world, higher than the United States. The United States was basically behind the creation of the League of Nations and the United Nations, its successor, because it was the leading power at the time. I think the European Union today, with its economic power, its value system would be, and the fact that the United States has left a vacuum, is the only one left to pick up the gauntlet.
And finally, do you see it happening?
I am definitely seeing signs in the right direction, but I would also expect that more will happen in the future. I think in the next Commission more will happen. I think it's more or less unavoidable.
The University of Huddersfield, inspiring tomorrow's professionals.